מי שנכנס אדר, מי שנכנס אדר, איי איי איי, מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה, מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה.
Chodesh, I'd like to dedicate all the words of Torah I'm about to say to the memory of Avi Mori, my father, Tzvi Meir, ben Moshe Yonatan, Zichron Levracha, whose yahrzeit on Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first of Adar. And in honor of Rosh Chodesh, I thought it would be appropriate to deal with a question that I was asked recently that I was never asked before. When they want to say that you don't need a community rabbi, they usually use the example of, you don't need a community rabbi for a question about Ya'ale V'Yavo. Because everybody knows that if you forget Ya'ale V'Yavo at Shachris or at Mincha, you have to repeat your Shmoneh Esrei. However, if you did forget your Ya'ale V'Yavo, say at Mincha, do you have to go and find another minyan in order to daven again? Or is it good enough for you to repeat your Shmoneh Esrei b'yechidus without a minyan? And this is a very appropriate topic for my father, Zichron Levracha, who never looked for shortcuts. If something was a little crooked, he would fix it until it was level. If something wasn't perfect, he would do everything possible to bring it to perfection. And therefore, even though this seems like a little bit of a klutz kasha, you have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei, so don't do it in a minyan, big deal. I believe that in his honor, we have to at least come up with a proper halachic answer. If indeed the halacha requires us to repeat the Amidah, what is the most proper, suitable way to do it? In a book called Da'at Note, which deals with a lot of the things that Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, used to say, he says there that at the end of the day, you do not need to go and find another minyan for a very simple reason. You already were Yotze Minyan. Maybe you were in Yotze Davening, maybe you were in Yotze Haskarat Me'en HaMe'orah, meaning Ya'ale V'Yavo, but for sure, you did Yotze Davening in a minyan. And this opinion is actually spelled out in a beautiful responsum called Beit Avi, Aleph Bet Yud Roshei Tevos. It was written by someone in our generation by the name of Rav Yitzchak Isaac Leibis. He says the following words: you don't have to find a minyan to repeat your Ya'ale V'Yavo and your Shmoneh Esrei. Even if you want to say that you did not fulfill your obligation to daven mincha, for sure, you were a Yotze davening in a minyan already. On the other hand, there's the position of Rav Elyashiv, brought in a book called Lishichno Tidrashu, beautiful book, that he says that ultimately you should find a minyan. And in the famous book about davening called Tfilah Kehilchata, bringing every sort of variation that you can think of regarding davening, he says in the name of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach on page 48 that you should try to find a minyan. They're not alone. In the book Mikra'i Kodesh, put out by Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank about Chanukah Purim, there's a perush by his grandson, Rav Yosef Cohen, called Hararei Kodesh. And he says in this footnote that based on a Gemara in Zvachim, Amarti lahavi raya, demishi palel betzibur v'shachach lomar Ya'ale V'Yavo, shechayav lehitpalel shenit, detzarich leader achar tzibur gam betfilato hashenit. That at the end of the day, if you forgot Ya'ale V'Yavo and you have to repeat your Shmoneh Esrei in order to make it up, you must do so in a minyan. And my question is, what is this machlokes based on? Do you need a minyan or you don't need a minyan to repeat the Shmoneh Esrei, this time with Ya'ale V'Yavo? Well, comes along Rabbi Ephraim Greenblatt, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. He died recently, in the last few years. And he says that in his opinion, Ulai yesh lomar de talui b'chiser haskarat Ya'ale V'Yavo ha'im kiyem ha'tfilah רק צריך לחזור ההזכרה, ואם כן לא צריך להיעדר שוב בתפילה בציבור. ואם לא קיים התפילה, אם כן צריך להדר, להביא לכלו להתפלל. He basically says that this goes back to a famous question, that when you forget Ya'ale V'Yavo, what's the damage that was done? According to Tosfot, in the name of Rabbeinu Yehuda, all you did was, you did not mention the special day, called Me'ena Ma'ora. You did daven, albeit you didn't mention that it's a special day. In his words, Harei kvar yitpalel kol tfilat mincha miba'od yom levad rosh chodesh shelo hiskir. And he makes it very clear that this is not like if you forgot to daven mincha, say on the eve of Shabbos, because there lo yitpalel klal. But when you daven and you forget Ya'ale V'Yavo, you've davened. However, you didn't daven with this addition. You have no choice but to repeat Shmoneh Esrei, because the only way to mention the addition is within the Shmoneh Esrei. On the other hand, there's another position known as the Chachmei Provincia, quoted by Rabbeinu Yonah, also quoted in the Tosfot in the name of the Rif, as understood by Rav Moshe Malover, that ultimately שבאותו תפילה לא יצא ידי חיוב, שלא יתפלל אותה כדינה, כמי שלא יתפלל. If on Rosh Chodesh you're supposed to daven properly, and you didn't daven properly because you didn't say Ya'ale V'Yavo, then it's like you didn't daven at all. So in a word, the Tosfos versus the Chachmei Provincia have a machlokas. When you don't daven Ya'ale V'Yavo, what's the damage done? According to Tosfos, you've davened, albeit you did not mention the addition, so you have to make it up. According to the Chachmei Provincia, it's like you didn't daven at all because you davened the wrong davening for that day. What's the nafkamina? Comes along Rav Greenblatt and says this: if you've davened already, then for sure you don't need to look for a minyan. You've davened and in a minyan. But if it's like you didn't daven at all, then you should look for a minyan. So that's one way we can explain it. But there's another way we can explain it, and that is using halachic rules that we use all the time, called a trei d'Rabbanan, a double d'Rabbanan. In a trei d'Rabbanan, we're usually mekel. What does that mean? According to the Rambam, davening once a day, every day is d'oraisa. But the actual words of davening, having 19 blessings in Ya'ale V'Yavo, for sure is the Rabbanan. So says Rav Leibus in that Shut Beit Avi, you have another d'Rabbanan here, and that d'Rabbanan is davening in a minyan. So you have two d'Rabbanans, one the Ya'ale V'Yavo, and two davening in your minyan. In a trei d'Rabbanan, when you have two d'Rabbanans, a double d'Rabbanan, for sure you can be mekel. So la halacha, even though there are poskim that say you should look for a minyan and look for a later mincha and daven again with a minyan, many are mekel. Either it's based on the fact that you've already davened, albeit you forgot one part of it, or it's based on the fact that it's a double d'Rabbanan and therefore you don't have to be so machmir on it. Or, as we said earlier, that any way you slice it, you've davened already in a minyan. You didn't daven properly, you didn't say the right words, but in a minyan you davened, and that's what Rav Leibus says, as did Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and therefore, la halacha, I believe that there's plenty of room to be mekel, that if you forgot Ya'ale V'Yavo, say it mincha or shachris, and you have to repeat your silent Amidah, you do not have to look for a minyan in order to do it. Obviously, if it's feasible, why not? But if not, you don't have to go out of your way.
ליהודים הייתה אורה בשמחה וששון בעיקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה בשמחה וששון בעיקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה בשמחה וששון בעיקר.